It was actually my agent's, Lindsay Colas' son, Little Drew. It was his crayons. We were at a vegan restaurant in Columbia, South Carolina. And we literally just had a menu, and we were just jotting down notes of things that we thought that were plausible, that were going to be good for us. And the next day, we literally sat down with Carol Callan, Jim Tooley, brought that piece of paper. They looked at it. We looked at the things that could work, that just didn't make sense. And that's all USA Basketball, because they could easily just shut it down. We'll get together, a month before the Olympics and do what we usually do. So they took initiative, which is what we need people to do. Take initiative, right? We talk about sponsorship money. We talk about these Fortune 500 companies. We talk about supporting women. But, where is that coming from? Where's that coming from?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Social Justice in Women's Basketball this week. This series started off as Social Justice in Women's Hockey, and that's the sport that I will follow the most. But I wanted to take the time out this week to talk about women's basketball, more specifically the WNBA. Let's get into the episode. I opened the episode with a clip from Diana Taurasi. I was able to speak to Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird, who, as the legend goes, drew up the plans for a more coordinated effort by USA Basketball and the WNBA to keep certain players from USA Basketball in the domestic market in the off season. I'm going to play you a few clips from there, from those interviews, I should say. This was at the 2019 All-Star Weekend in Las Vegas. I think it's a fascinating concept, and at the time that it was announced, it got me thinking a lot about soccer and the soccer model that we see in the United States on the women's side. Also, shout out to Bria Felician and Kelsey Trainer, who joined me on the last episode of Social Justice in Women's Soccer. You can find that episode right here. Go check it out. It's top notch. Anyway, we have always in this country, since women's soccer really began to come on the map in the 90s, have seen the U.S. women's soccer team, even in their struggle for equal pay, their struggle for a domestic league, they've been a national part of the conversation. And hindsight is 2020. I was a young, impressionable child, not as plugged into the news as I am now as an adult. So perhaps that's the lens that I see it through in hindsight. But even in hindsight, history has its eyes, if you will. Shout out to the Hamilton fans. History has its eyes on the U.S. women's national team in a way that eyes have never been fixated on women's basketball or the WNBA, that next year celebrates 25 seasons, consecutive seasons. And I have some theories as to why. We're going to get into some of those, but this week, I'm dedicating all of these episodes to freedom fighters, to social justice activists and leaders. If you haven't listened to Gotta Get Up, which is my women's basketball show, primarily, well, it's supposed to be focused on the New York Liberty, but I'm getting just so much Wubble content that I didn't want to leave anyone out. So I have an episode, the latest episode here, that I dedicated to 3 men, including one who I had the pleasure of working alongside. But so I want to open this episode reading from Freedom's Daughter, the unsung heroines of the civil rights movement from 1830 to 1970. This is by Lynn Olson. This is from chapter 2, that is about Ida B. Wells. The quote is, "She has shaken this country." So there you go, Ida B. But here we go. I want to read this because I think it's apropos to what I want to talk about on this episode. In their activism, they were following the example of early 19th century female forebearers, and their example, in turn, would be followed by their daughters, granddaughters, and great-granddaughters in the 20th century. I think that women's voluntary organizations have been in the forefront for whatever social change there is. Dorothy Height, longtime president of the National Council of Negro Women, declared in the 1970s. The fact that this is a male-dominated society, indeed a white male-dominated society, means that males are so involved in the systems and institutions that they don't feel the need to do anything to bring about change. As a Black woman, I would have to say that it's been the women who have dared to tackle the racial issues. This is from Dorothy Height in 1970, and this rings true and has been ringing true since at least 2016 when it comes to domestic basketball. And that's why I want to lead this conversation. Let me preface. The conversation that I want to have today is an exploration of the interesting position that the WNBA is in. On the one hand, the WNBA is a league that is made up of 80% of women who are Black and that identify as Black. When we're seeing this new wave, and again, it's a new wave, but it's the same ocean. I don't know if is that the, we say new wave, but it's an ongoing fight for freedom. And in this book, what I love about it is that it breaks down, again, it's Freedom's Daughters. There you go. I'll put the link in the description. It breaks down all of the ways that women, all women, have been fighting for freedom and for equity. But it also shows the rift between women, and that Black women are usually the first responders, but the last to reach equality. And I was talking to Sue and Diana as we saw the Women's World Cup coming up. There were all these partners with Hulu and Budweiser. We've seen those partnerships continue now to the Challenge Cup. I got it right this time. To the Challenge Cup, where Budweiser is the title sponsor for the semifinals. There was a game that was on earlier today, one tonight, Sky Blue versus Chicago. We've never seen that happen for women's basketball. And it can definitely be argued that if we were to divvy dollars based on merit, that all of our women's national teams would be better funded than our men's teams, but that there probably should be no national team that is funded better than our women's basketball team. And that's just not the case. And I think the theory that I have is, and I played a little bit from Diana, and you'll hear from her and Sue Bird in a moment, is that it is a league of 80% Black women. So going back to this book, Freedom's Daughters, it's very commonplace to have Black women initiate the work, to do the brunt of the work, and to continue the work throughout, as again was just in that passage, from their daughters to their granddaughters to their great-granddaughters, and to still not reach that equity, that freedom, that equality. What does this mean for the WNBA, Erica? Here's the truth, and it's also in this book. Society has proven time after time that they're not going to listen to Black women. Society has also proven time and time again that Black women already have the ideas. What we need are for white women, Black men, and white men to listen to Black women and elevate and promote and fund and support our ideas. We know how to fix this because we've been going through this, okay? But it requires everyone to be educated, everyone to position themselves to reach out to people that don't identify the way they do, and to reach out to people that are outside of their immediate circle in order to push the agenda forward. And I think that's exactly what we've seen with Angel City.
Los Angeles, where the concrete meets the coast, where talent meets triumph. A city defined by its citizens and powered by their dreams. A place that moves the world. And what better time is there to move than now? Welcome to a new era of sport and entertainment. Unapologetic, undeniable, unstoppable. That's who we are, because that's who the city is. Bright lights and brighter stars. This is the place. This is the time. The global sport in the global city. Coming together, we're naturally destined to be bigger than the game. Rewriting the script, righting the wrongs, building a women's football club that lives up to the name. Angel City. And you're a part of it. Part of driving change forward. Welcome to the beginning.
Angel City FC. Now, you've got Natalie Portman, you've got Alexis Ohanian, or Serena's husband. You have Olympia, Serena Williams. So many names. Such a long list of names attached to this new women's professional sports team in LA. And I've seen on Twitter, I've felt it myself, and I had a conversation with someone, at least on my end, a very passionate conversation about why we're not seeing this in the WNBA. And honestly, I think it boils down to marketing. And marketing is inherently impacted by racism. That's the bluntness. And I don't think there's any getting around that. So, but don't take my word for it. Hear what Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird have to say. Both of these are audio clips. They were taken after the announcement that USA Basketball and the WNBA were going to partner to core essentially 8 players, 12 total national team players, stateside, so that they don't have to travel overseas to make money and can promote the league here. So this is from last July, about a year ago. And Diana Taurasi, or excuse me, Sue Bird first, and then Diana Taurasi.
I do wonder, a lot of people question whether because of the makeup of a women's basketball team,
what do you mean by makeup?
In all ways, in race, in obviously gender, but also...
No, I mean, listen, I think whenever I'm asked about what are the, obstacles, we use the WNBA, because that's the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's building a business. What are some of the obstacles? It's like, we dance around some things that are important and are obstacles, You could guess, right? Like whether it's the travel conversation that just happened, oh, this is an issue, or we need to do that. But at the end of the day, and this is something I've always said, we live in a society where, people are racist, people are homophobic, and our league is extremely diverse in those categories, and that's pretty much our, like, as you said, our makeup.
Yeah.
And so that is an obstacle. It's at times the elephant in the room, but that is an obstacle. But again, I think now is the time. When you think about just what's going on in our country, now is the time to support us, I think, because of what we represent, but also for us to use this platform and use our voices because of who we are and what we're representing.
It seems like the national team in soccer has really made a point to have what they get at the national team trickle to the league. Right. Do you see this when you were writing up on that crayon? Yeah. Was that part of the vision?
Well, it's hard to compare. I don't know how long the soccer league's been around for. Not very long, right?
This is the 7th season.
7th season.
But 3 different iterations.
Right. So, they've had their trouble keeping the leagues alive, even throughout the women's soccer team's success. With success, can you sustain it? That's always been the tricky part. Can the soccer league sustain it, after there's no World Cup? And that is the one thing that the WNBA has been able to do, is be successful, not using the national team as a balancing board. So I think there's some good synergy, and hopefully this makes that relationship a little bit better and stronger.
And another thing, I mean, the women's basketball team is I think, our most successful national team program. But that hasn't always come with the exposure.
Well, if we don't talk about how this country views leagues differently, that would be a mistake, and that would be very ignorant. I mean, we're obviously a league of diversity, of minorities, of, gay women, and that is not something easy for the United States to talk about. Certainly not easy for them to support, obviously. And then you see the women's national team, you see the makeup of that team pretty clearly. And these are conversations we have very openly. Like, these aren't, it's taboo to talk about it to reporters because, it's these touchy subjects. But as players around the league, we know what the facts are, and they're in our face. And it's how do we use all those things to our advantage? I think in the past, the WNBA has hidden things that now are things that, people want to fight for and, are things that people want to really get behind.
That both Sue and Diana, and you'll hear from Breanna Stewart later, they have these conversations. They're very aware and cognizant of the bias that exists in how women's basketball is marketed. Women's basketball players know this. And I'm going to address something and then explain to you why I'm having you hear from these white women in the league. Now, there's a piece of me that finds it very interesting that, generally speaking, the more well-known USA basketball players, WNBA players, regardless of how many championships they have, how many MVPs that they've won, et cetera, how successful their team is, the overwhelming majority of the most popular WNBA players are white. The U.S. women's national team is overwhelmingly white. That's that racism in marketing, overt, covert, implicit bias that exists. But what I think is important is, again, for those women to utilize their platform and to speak for the group and not necessarily as themselves. And that could be hard. And there will be some things that the spokespeople enjoy as opposed to those who are not. But I think in this particular case, I want you to hear from white players. And this hopefully will be a longer conversation because, in case you can't tell, I have a lot to say about this. But I wanted to start with Stewie and Sue and Diana because I want you to hear them tell you that there's a racial bias, that there's a gender bias, and that bias also extends to the fact that the WNBA, generally speaking, they have embraced the WNBA as a culture, as a league, right? Is very well represented on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. This is nothing new to WNBA players. Diana and Sue saying last year, this is something that we talk about all the time that we don't necessarily talk about in media. Well, now is the time to talk about it in media. But I want you to hear that these white women have been talking about this for at least a year. The next clips that you'll hear will be from Stewie, Breanna Stewart, and again from Diana Taurasi. And this is while they're in the wobble. And so Social Justice Council has already been put into place, etc. I specifically asked Stewie the question that I am really grappling with. On the one hand, we want allies to step up, to use their voice. We also want allies. This is the general we, right? There's a call for allies to step up and speak up. There's a call for allies to sit back and learn and let the voices of Black people and Black communities be heard. And I think that neither of those can be blanketed. I think there are times when the Black community needs to be uplifted, and what needs to happen is that those with white privilege in particular, but any privilege, those with privilege need to make space. I also think there's a time when you have to hold white players, in this case, to task. I've been on a lot of these Zoom calls. The Zoom circuit is what I like to call it. It's not very often that white players from the calls that I've been on are asked about the Social Justice Council. Almost every Black player has been asked about the Social Justice Council. Everyone in the WNBA, it's widely accepted that the WNBA players are on board with the Social Justice Council. So why is it that an overwhelmingly white male media corps is only asking Black women about the Social Justice Council? They should be asking all players. That's where I'm coming from. That's my take. So to begin my social justice in women's basketball series, you are going to hear from white players first. And that's counter to what I believe on the other side, which is a general issue that the WNBA has, which is that we only hear from white players. But in this case, I think it's important to hear from white players. Thank you so much. Stewie, I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about the Social Justice Council.
Yeah.
I think, your petitioning for Black Lives Matter on the court is probably one of the more obvious reasons that you were selected. But I'd like to just ask you, what was the lead up to officially being named as one of the players for that? And then also just a follow up to that, this league is overwhelmingly made up of Black and brown players, but I'm curious, as the conversation outside of the WNBA really asks allies to step up, what do you feel is the appropriate level of engagement for players like yourself that don't identify as Black in these conversations?
Yeah. So the Social Justice Council, as we were leading up to going into the bubble, we knew that there was going to be a lot more happening in this bubble besides us just playing basketball. We're going to be using our platform in a bigger way than just our sport. Obviously, with all the social injustice and everything that's been going on, there was things that we needed to do better, and there was things that we need to continue to stand up and kind of figure out how we wanted to use our platform, and that's where the Social Justice Council came about. And Leja actually asked me to be on it, and I'm a person, I just want to stand up for what's right, and I believe there's no room for racism in this country. I mean, how Natasha Cloud put it in the Players Tribune article was kind of the best way that I can see it is, we're in 2020 and you think that we should have flying cars. We shouldn't be having to deal with the racism and the racial injustice in this country. So the fact that Leja asked me to be a part of it, I was more than honored. And, I know that my platform goes beyond myself as a basketball player. And the second part of the question, I think, what I can do best is obviously, like you said, continue to be an ally. This league is 80% of Black females, and we know that. And I think we're embracing that. And we want to show that, first of all, we've always been the league that's really been sticking up for – hold on one second. No worries. I mean, we've always been the league that's really been here first, talking about issues that are important and close to us. And for me, I'm going to just continue to be an ally, continue to use my voice, continue to educate myself, educate the people around me, and also know that – I have a big spotlight on me and I'm white, but I can also pass the mic to my other teammates who aren't white and give them opportunities to continue to raise their voice and shed light on different perspectives that we have.
All right. Hola, Diana. Thank you for your time. I spoke to you last year in Vegas, you and Sue Bird. We were talking a little bit about just the opportunity missed when you have a league that is over 80% Black women and also has a population that identifies as LGBTQ queer, to utilize those voices. We're almost a year out from that. I'm curious if you think that things have changed, particularly thinking about that new CBA and now the Social Justice Council?
I think everything's been changed in the last, couple months. Everything's been turned upside down where, from the uncomfortable conversations to, social action, there are things that we're just not willing to stay silent about anymore. And whether it's Black Lives Matter, which is something that the league and a lot of people in the WNBA support and will continue to support, whether people don't like it. Those are things that are strongholds for us, and we're not going to let go of those things. We made strides in a lot of different social areas, and Black Lives Matter should have been number one from the beginning. And I think you see a lot of people stepping up in that role to make sure that our voices are heard. And like I said, not everyone's going to like it. Some people are going to feel uncomfortable, but that's life. A lot of people in this country have felt uncomfortable for a long time already.
So what I liked, again, in what Stewie was saying, she's talking about making space, right? She talks a little bit about why she was asked on the council. I want to, Diana said something, and she, again, is on point as always. Talking about how, this is not new. This is how a lot of people in this country have felt. Skylar Diggins has been a player, Skylar Diggins Smith. On one of the media rounds, she was asked about the Social Justice Council, or she was asked, about coming to the bubble and how she feels. And she said she feels conflicted. She feels conflicted about deciding to be away from her family. She would not get into, and she flat out said something akin to, it's none of your business, as to how she came upon her decision to not bring her family into the bubble, which she could have. What I think is interesting is, even though, and it's tough to do these Zoom calls, to be honest, especially with a conversation like this, and it's not all the time that the player can actually see us. And I personally would prefer if I could be seen while asking questions like this. I don't know, it's just preference of mine. But anyway, but Skylar did say she would be consistent with her messaging. And so one of the things that she did, and I think this was on ESPN, but I'm going to read this from her Instagram. She wrote a letter that she then posted. Let me get his name, because I think I really want you to look this up. I'll put a link in the description, but I want you to look this up because I read his post and it was very difficult. Vox Booker. On July 4th, Mr. Booker, a civil rights activist, was enjoying the holiday weekend with friends at Lake Monroe in Bloomington, Indiana. A group of white men told him that he was trespassing on private property. Mr. Booker left to avoid trouble, but later returned in an attempt to smooth things over. The group rewarded Mr. Booker's good faith by cornering and assaulting him, violently pinning him against a tree, and threatening to lynch him. Skylar's letter that she posted on Instagram ends with, "Now more than ever, it is crucial that federal law enforcement entities show that they take racism seriously and stand on the same side as the Black Americans who face it every single day. Americans are watching. Only bringing the attackers to justice will honor their trust. Respectfully, Skylar Diggins Smith." So Skylar, I don't think, is necessarily as comfortable as some to talk about this in media availability, where she goes from being asked questions about her being on a new team to her family to social justice. I get the impression that that's just not what she's comfortable with. This is going to be complex, even in the WNBA. And that's why I wanted to make sure to make this video. A lot of people see the WNBA. The WNBA is doing this right. They're in their 24th season. The WNBA is doing this right. They have a partnership with the NBA. The WNBA is doing this right. They have a social justice council. It's not that simple. None of that came easy. And even now that they have it, it's not easy. But what I give credit to WNBA players, in particular in the last 5 years, I feel it's been more consistent with this crop of players, is that they have a unified voice, is that there is consistency, and that they stand firm on what they believe to be right. And I've never disagreed with them yet. When the league wanted to fine them for wearing warm-up shirts that were not approved, The players went into their locker rooms, respective locker rooms, did media blackouts, and they also spoke to their rookies or other players and said, listen, we got you. If they fine us, it will be taken care of. But this is what we're doing, to the point where the league had to pivot and had to change. And that's what Black women always do. And so going back to Angel City, a lot of people are wondering when and if and how and what it would look like to get a group of people behind the WNBA and a WNBA team the way that this group of, you know, it was like 14 investors has gotten behind U.S. soccer. And the short of it, the way I see it, is that the WNBA and USA Basketball has done a negligent job of marketing these players. And so have agents, generally speaking, over the years. And so has media. That's how I feel. So how can, you know, and I'm looking at Meg Linehan's piece for The Athletic, link in the description. One of the investors was at a basketball game and was asked about the NWSL and didn't know anything about the NWSL. Knew about the World Cup, didn't know about the domestic league. The U.S. national team players for soccer have done a really good job from the last between the last two World Cups to build the market for the national team and the NWSL. I think that potentially the initiative that Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi crafted up, you heard a little bit about that in the beginning of the show, could have potential to do that. But what also has to happen is that there's no generational celebrity in the WNBA. There's not enough players that have come from the WNBA, that have remained in touch with the WNBA, and that have enough wealth to give back or invest in the WNBA. So to set up the next social justice in women's basketball show, I'm going to leave you with this clip from Diana Taurasi.
It takes people, and we talk about women's basketball and women's soccer, and you're like, oh, why is it not popular? And you're like, well, where are the fucking rich females at?
Yeah. Or just the rich people in general. That's what, like,
no, rich females. No. Rich females. Where are the rich females?
Okay, we talk about rich females for sure. But people discredit the influence of the systemic nature of, like, just rich individuals. So if we're talking about, like, Chelsea,
where are the rich females, Megan?
I agree.
She wants women to support women.
I totally agree. But, like, in general, like, people are saying, like, oh, the system around men's soccer is, like, so robust, and system around blah, blah, blah. But it's like, no, it's Roman Abramovich. It's like, the sheikh that owns Man City. Mm-hmm. It's like the group that owns Liverpool.
Yeah, they're men supporting men.
Men supporting men, for sure. But it's like, it's specific rich people. So I do agree with you. I'm like, where's the rich women?
Where are the rich women?
The rich women with the passion for sport?
With the passion for sport, exactly.
There are women.
They'll be passionate about other shit.
Yeah. With the passion for sport, but also I'm like, this is a money-making opportunity. Like, sports in general is money-making. Like, period. People love to go fucking see sports. Like, yeah, maybe women's sports isn't where men's sports is right now, but it's only because we've lacked investment.
That's true.
I'm so disappointed in the women that have a lot of money, and I'm going to be very simple-minded.
Go ahead.
Like, Where are the women with a lot of money that wanna invest in women's basketball, whatever it may be, as a fucking pro bono, whatever, as a tax write-off?
No, I'm like, as a money-making opportunity. There's money.
Whatever.
I know there's money.
Money. I make money. Sue makes money. Penny makes money. Sometimes you invest in things that don't make money if you want to make better. Yeah. And I've done that with a lot of investments.
I think women do it. They just don't have a passion for sport. Like it's
I know
doing it in other things, but it's like you need that 1 or 10 or 12 that love sport as well.
The thing is, I feel like you need the initial 1 or 10 or 12 to like invest in it as like, okay, we believe in this, but like sport just in general is a money-making opportunity. Like we see that at every level. Like if you actually invest in women's sports, like it makes money. Period. Like we know that.
Like we all know, like women make 80% of the purchases in the household. So isn't that like a marketing opportunity as well?
Yeah,
it's funny. It's funny. Everyone's like, "Oh, do you want to be a coach? Do you want to be a GM?
No.
Do this? No, I want to fucking own it.
Yeah, I want to own it. I know you don't want to rebound. Yeah, that's what it is. We don't want to rebound. You're not trying to rebound
anywhere for millions of dollars. Because I want to be an owner. I don't want to be a coach. I'm not doing drags. I'm not doing handoffs.
You're not trying to rebound.
You know
just say it.
About.
Like me. I want to be the person who pays like Diana Taurasi.
No, I love a drag. But I'm trying to own a team.
And so I don't even know if I made a lot of sense on this show, but I wanted to set it up. These are my thoughts in closing. These are my thoughts. The reason that the WNBA doesn't have an investor group, and I think the Seattle Storm are probably the closest, it's a majority women-owned team, and it is an investor group, right? The reason that women's basketball doesn't have that, and that there aren't more women investing in women's sports, in particular women's basketball, like Diana Taurasi was just saying, my take is because it's Black women. That's how I feel. And I think that marketing firms, companies, marketing professionals don't know how to market Black women, or they don't care to know. And so when Renee Hess of Black Girl Hockey Club tells people to hire more Black women in particular, this is why she does that. Because there is an innate bias in our society as it exists. And it's been there since 1830. In 1970, Dorothy Height was talking about it. In 2019, Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi talked to me about it. And we're still talking about it today, 1 year later, from my conversation with them. And we'll talk about it tomorrow and the next day and the next, until we identify and own up to the fact that we have a society that is biased against Black women and women of color in particular. We don't offer them jobs, even though they're one of the most educated groups in this country. That's also in here. There's a reason why, and I would love to get into that. I actually think I did this on IG once. So in some ways, that's given Black women, women of color, but particularly Black women, this route to education. And that would be great, except that educated Black women do not make as much money as almost any other group. So when we talk about that intergenerational wealth, when we talk about wanting women to support women, it's usually going to be white women supporting other white women, unless they know what I'm telling you right now, which is that there is an inherent and for some, an implicit bias against Black and brown women, regardless of their education, regardless of their wealth, if they can attain it. And that is why, this is my theory, we're not seeing partnership groups support women's basketball like we just saw with Angel City FC. Make sure you check out Meg's article. That's linked below. I am going to leave the link for Freedom's Daughter highly recommend, highly recommend this. And thanks for watching. I feel like, I don't know, hopefully I made some sense. Let me know in the comments. But I really want to get into this because I think the WNBA, I'm really interested to see how white players are going to utilize their voice. And I know that, and I've spoken to a few that say they want to listen and learn. But I also think they need to be encouraged, just as anyone else in the WNBA, to find their voice. And I hope that that happens because from what I know from history and my lived experience, unfortunately, there's a limit to how far, when it comes from a social movement to policy and business practice, there's a limit to the access that Black women have. But when Black women can pass the baton in faith to other allies, that's when things get done. And that hasn't happened for the WNBA, generally speaking. But it's time. It's time. All right. We're going to have more from the Wubble next time around. And also link in here if you want to sign up for just like a open Google chat. Ari Chambers is going to join me. Kelsey Trainer is going to join me. Jackie Powell is going to join me. We're going to have some drinks. We're going to have some fun. And we're going to watch the New York Liberty host the Seattle Storm for the opening tip-off of the 2020 WNBA season in the Wubble. Link in the description. It will also be on my social media channels. Who do you want to hear from on another episode of Social Justice In? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much.